Welcome to Between Authors. I am your host, author Adrian Lopez. What is it that excites us as a reader? It's finding that book or author that you may never have heard of, but may have been the treasure you've been hunting for all along. The goal of my podcast is to bring to you those authors and those books that could be that treasure you're looking for. Today, on episode 29, I bring to you author Jolene Fine. We're going to go over a little bit about who she is, what she's published, and what she's working on in the future. Welcome to the show, Jolene.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm glad you're here today. Why don't you begin by giving the viewers a little introduction to who you are?
Okay. My name is Jolene Fine, and I'm a former teacher. I own a cleaning business. I've had it small cleaning business for I think 11 years now. So I'm an entrepreneur, and I've been writing for about 20 years. I took a 10-year break, and I've been starting to write again. I've published two books. Technically, I published three, but one of them probably doesn't count because it was like a children's book a really, really long time ago. And but I published a comedy and a sci-fi novel.
Okay. We're going to go over both of those for the viewers more in detail for both of those. But before we do that, why don't you give the viewers a little kind of a background of what your influences are? What influences you creatively?
So it's a good question. um, I mean, most of most of my influences, I suppose, either came from like my childhood. I was a foster care child, so my character is one of them is a foster child, and I come from a religious upbringing, so faith tends to be an important theme in my writing.
Okay. So let's begin with we'll go with the comedy you wrote, which is called Dog Breath. Um, why don't you give the viewers a little bit? There you go. And as well on this podcast, I always put a photo of your book cover
Okay.
on the screen. So that would be, but that's great. That would be on there as well for the viewers to find that as well as the links below for all the books we discussed today. But why don't you give a little bit of a synopsis about what Dog Breath is about?
Okay. So Tom Tidy has a very unusual job. He smells dog breath for a living. He works at a dog food company, and he is just loves dogs, but his job is about to get sniffed out with technology. And it is a lighthearted comedy. It's also a romantic comedy, and it's about, trying to save his job. And So it's a Southern comedy. It's a clean, dry bar. The purpose of it, and the reason that I actually wrote that one was I went to college for English education and for English literature. By the time I was done with all the English literature classes, I was so exhausted from just having to like dissect things so much. And then I went to teaching and I taught seventh grade. And seventh grade literature, I don't know if you know this, is super fun. It's lighthearted, and it's just like you pick up a book and you read it and you're like, oh, that's so funny, and you don't have to think about it anymore. And I really wanted a book for adults that was just like that. And I could not find anything that was clean that was a comedy. So I set about writing my own comedy, because as an industry, there is comedy in writing, but there wasn't a book that was just comedy. So that's what it is. It's like Liar Liar, Dumb and Dumber, but it's a book.
Yeah, I mean that's a great idea because a lot of times most of the books, like you said, most of the ones you read, there's a message, there's a deep story behind it, and you forget that sometimes it is just a getaway for whatever the length of time it is to read that book. So you do want something, just like movies. You don't always want maybe the greatest script or whatever. Sometimes you just want something fun for that 90 minutes or whatever it is to watch, right? And that's an excellent point, like you said, that you looked and like there's nothing out there like this. And I always appreciate when somebody does something in a different direction and something they wanted to see couldn't find it, so you make it happen yourself.
Yeah, and so I set it in Tallahassee and in Havana, Florida, which is where I'm from. And so I knew the area quite well. And I mean, I had to do some research on dog, companies and whatnot. But there are some pretty good shenanigans that happen at this dog food factory. um, they're quite entertaining. And so, my favorite thing specifically about that book is the character has an acute smeller, like a sniffer, and that's how he got his job. So, he actually refers to all of the characters by their smell, which I had also never come across as a writer at that time. I'm not sure if since then they've had it. Again, I wrote it, several years ago. So we have salami breath, we have menthol cigarettes, we have, dog breath, we have mango mama, we have a lot of characters that are just referred to, by their actual smell, which makes it even funnier, I think.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I get, like I said, I really do appreciate when authors or anybody in general does stuff outside of the box, right? Where you come from a different angle. It's just something I've always appreciated, and I just truly love when I see that. So that sounds great. The way you approached it, the way you thought about it. Um, is there was there? I know it's a comedy and more lighthearted and stuff, but was there a hard scene to write in the book? And it doesn't necessarily have to be, it could be anything. It could be, actually writing it. Maybe it was difficult putting together, or something that pulled from an emotion or a memory that was a little difficult. Something along that line.
Um, so I think the hardest scenes for me to write was it was one that used an onion technique, and I don't know if you're familiar with it, but basically it's trying to show who the character is by putting them in their community. And so the character goes to church and you see like all of these like people and how he interacts with them in the parking lot. Um so just creating a funny scene um on paper that involved so many people was difficult, but I think it came out really well. It probably would translate into a much um funnier play or something where you can actually see it. But
Hmm.
even when I read it now, I wrote it and I will still laugh at it. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I was so funny. Like, when was I so funny?
That's great. I do have a side question for you, and this is very interesting that I've noticed. So, I've interviewed a lot of authors for this podcast, and what I found very interesting is I would say maybe 60% or more have all been teachers at some point or are currently teachers, which was very interesting to me, and not necessarily English or literature teachers, but just teachers in general. And do you have any kind of thought on maybe why that is? Because it's just, I've always found it very interesting that almost everyone that comes on, they go, "Oh yeah, I was a teacher and I decided to do this," and it was just very interesting that correlation between all the authors.
Um, you know, why am I not a teacher? I don't know why, if there is a correlation. I do think that in general, as teachers, we are taught how to write things properly. And if you can teach someone else how to write something, then you probably can write something yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Um,
It actually does.
so it's very possible. And I still love to teach other people. And that's part of like being in this like book talk community is I love helping other people. I love, having that interaction with like the writing community and like writing sprints and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's for those that are not part of it, the writing community is, you know, kind of amazing how supportive a lot of them are. As with anything, you do have that section that are not, but the majority is very supportive and very,
I
uh,
haven't met those yet.
yeah.
They
They're more
must
on
be on
Twitter.
the other side.
Yeah, they're more on Twitter and some of the other sites, but it is very it's just pretty amazing how supportive the writing community is with each other, right? And I think it just goes back to all of us understanding the work we put in to do this, um, how you kind of feel like you're on your own sometimes because you really are. Your marketing's all done by yourself, everything's done by yourself.
Yeah.
And for probably the majority, this is a secondary thing because almost everybody has a career or a job or something else they're doing, full time. And this is something because it's a passion, thing. You're squeezing it in when you can, right? So
Mhm.
it is something that I've truly just amazed with the writing community and the support that's out there.
Oh, so the only other thing I would like to say about dog breath
Yeah.
is that I do plan on making it into a play, um, that like a script. And if there's any schools that want, I have several like acting challenges um, that I am offering like 20 free scripts to like the winners of acting challenges if they act out like a scene and they're, it's in my link tree, but like the specifics of it. But I am planning on making that into a script hopefully by the end of the year. It just depends on the amount of participation I can get in the acting challenge this year.
Have you written scripts before, or is this going to be your first one?
This is going to be my first one. So I was actually looking, I have talked to a couple of other people in I grew up doing drama. I was in the theater program for 10 years. Um so I'm very familiar with scripts. But I do know several writers that are willing to help me out. Plus, I am also looking to partner with, like an acting teacher or someone else that is interested in in transforming the book into a script, kind of thing. That would help me.
Okay. I know there's several authors that I interviewed that have written scripts, and have there's a couple that came from that side of writing and then have moved over into books on that side. And there's also one that I've interviewed on the podcast who's an actor.
Mhm.
And he wrote a bunch of short films that actually won a bunch of awards last year at a lot of the film conventions. So I'll send them a note too, and maybe see if there's something they can help you with, or something they can kind of lean you a certain direction or give you an idea. Especially the
Yeah,
actor,
for
the actor
sure.
Steven, he may have something for, like you said, for the acting classes or something on that side that he can kind of lean you towards.
Thanks.
Hmm. Um, and the other thing I noticed too is that I believe you have audiobooks on both of your books as well, right?
I do.
Is that
So
something you're going to continue with on everything? Is that you're just going to offer, all four options, the unlimited, ebook, paperback, and audiobook?
yes, yes, I actually even have lesson plans. I have lesson plans for my books too. Yay! And book club discussions in case you want those. So
That goes back to the teaching
it
credentials of putting
does.
the lesson plan
Any
together.
way I can get you to read the book.
So let's talk about the other book. So,
Okay.
okay, is it
Kalani.
Kalani, The Shadows of Destiny, and it says book one, I believe, on there. So, what do how many books do you plan, or you're going to kind of let it go as you write them?
So originally I was planning on writing one story. Except for when I created this world, which is an immortal world in an imaginary galaxy, I actually had to create two worlds. So, because my reference is not Earth, I created another Earth like planet in an imaginary galaxy that the people in this immortal world reference. So, I have two worlds. The immortal world is called Kalani. And so much did not get to happen in the first book that there is a second book. I have written it already. I am starting the third book. Um, I am not releasing the second book yet. I'm going to finish the third book and then go back and take a look at it and try to get my book one sales up before releasing a second book. The book one is a standalone. You can totally read it, and I'm going to design all of the books so that if you picked it up, you could understand what's happening in the worlds um, without actually having to read the other ones. It would just be, it will also be a continuing story, if that makes sense. It's very
Yeah.
similar to things that like Brandon Sanderson has done in his trilogy, where kind of thing. I'm not positive because I have not finished book three, whether or not it's going to be a trilogy or four books. But after that, I do plan on continuing the what I call Fostering Worlds series, which if I don't continue on Kalani, it'll happen on the home world, because I have so many of their stories that I've already created as well.
So,
So,
you know, because you're in the fantasy genre, right? And
mhm.
like you said, world building is probably the biggest portion of that in that genre because you're taking it, somewhere else. That's part of the fantasy world that you're creating. Did you find that difficult as you started to do that? Because I'm assuming this would be your first fantasy that you wrote, and
This is my first fantasy. So I had a very clear idea of the world that I wanted as an immortal world. It is very symbolic of a spiritual afterlife for, say, Catholics or Mormons or um certain Christians that believe in like a waiting period for the resurrection. And I'm so I had a very clear idea of what I wanted for Kalani. Now, when it has come to when they're referencing their old world, I didn't necessarily have a hard time as much as I've enjoyed making it up, because in my mind there was something that was distinct about this immortal world. I already knew the world, like I could see it, and so I didn't have to make any of that up. that makes sense.
Yeah, no,
Because it was already there. Like
yeah,
literally, I never stopped and was like, well, I wonder what they do or what they're called or where things are or what the government is like. Like I never had to do that because it existed, you
yeah,
know, already in my mind. Now I did have to plan their home world that they reference, their mortal world, and I had to establish what continents they were, and I had to decide, well, what do they look like geography, like, and where are they, and what their cultures are and what is their history. But I enjoyed doing that. And it is actually something that is continuing. It's not something that, because not everything comes up at once, you don't actually have to have everything. Like sometimes people think, oh my goodness, how did you have like all these, or how did so and so have, say Star Wars, have this entire galaxy created? He probably didn't.
yeah,
He probably made it up as he went along, because you didn't need every single piece of the puzzle at the beginning. And as things come up, like say animals in a certain area, or fruit, or what they are wearing, or or just cultural things that they did, or traditions that they no longer get to do. As these things come up, then I create them.
yeah. Did you, again, this is a side question, but did you
Okay.
find yourself as you're creating this as you go? Did you do a almost like reference things for you for later on for the second and third book, or I understand completely what you're saying with everything being in your mind because that's kind of how I write too.
Oh yeah. Some people have journals and stuff like that. I have a bunch of random papers like everywhere. And then I also, and this is not just for me, but I have asked several people who have series, how do you remember all of the stuff? And they're like, I just Google on my other document, because that's what I do too.
Yeah,
Like if I forget, like, oh my goodness, what did I say that they were? What did they do for their funerals? I just Google it in my other document,
yeah.
you know?
I mean, it's the way it's basically the old Cliff Notes, just going through getting what you need to,
Yeah.
for the paper.
I mean, so otherwise, I'm not very organized. I do have lots of little scraps of paper around, and sometimes I'm like, oh my goodness, where is it? And I do need to get more organized as far as that goes. But my problem is that I think of things all the time. Like if I'm cleaning a house, or if I'm at church or whatever, I will write it down wherever I am at, you know? And it just never seems, so I have like church bulletins on my desk. And
To have notes.
yes, yes, and sometimes it's just like a random thought.
Yeah,
um Especially since mine, and again, does have like spiritual themes. Sometimes I'll be like, oh, and I'll ask like a question to myself. I'll be like, I'm like, where my character needs to ask this kind of thing. The other day, I was talking to someone on TikTok, and we were both foster kids. And she says, I always I always wanted my own children to look like me, because I didn't have any reference for my physical features. And I was like, I got to write that down, because I personally never felt that way. So, but but my character is a foster kid, so I'll just take her little thing, you know.
yeah, and it's that's an excellent point because you know even when there's shared experiences, everybody takes away from it something different, right? It just and
Mhm.
that's a great point is that you both grew up in the same system, but you both took away something different from it, right? And that's a good point is that, when you do some of these things from experience, right, from something that you have, it's always a great thing for the readers that had that same experience, right? It's that connection that they're not alone. It's somebody else has that as well. And
Mhm.
it's just a deeper connection for them to your story, to your book as they're reading it. But that is an excellent point that you both came away a little differently from the same experience.
So in this book, the hardest thing for me to write, I don't know if it was the hardest thing for me to write as much as it was a hard moment for me. When I wrote this one scene between Desiree and her mother, her foster mother, my adopted foster mother is dead. And so I never got to tell her certain things. And I wrote out this scene where Desiree has pushed away her mother, and and she wants so badly to tell her things like, I love you and thank you for adopting me, but she can't because it's too hard. And so a lot of the same scenes, a lot of the feelings, almost every interaction that Desiree has with her foster mom is either I wanted to have with my foster mom, or I did have it and I've just recreated it in my book.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you find that to be not healing but therapeutic as you were writing some of those?
I guess I did get to say things to my mom that I didn't normally get to say. I did learn a lot about myself um when I wrote, and I think most people do. When you have to write emotions, you have to really look inward at
Yeah.
yourself and be like, even just when you're expressing things and you're like anxiety, and then you're like, okay, how do I feel? How do I experience anxiety? Like, what do I do? Do I do this? And then what does this look like? What does this literally look like? And what am I feeling? And, you know, do you do this? Like, how do you experience anxiety or some other emotion? And why? Also really enjoyed writing in first person. I don't know how you write yours, but it helped me connect better with the characters, going straight through it. And since then I've had a hard time reading third person. Like, I feel like a huge disconnect in when I'm reading third person now, because I feel spoiled. Like, you have like the insider information on first person. So
Yeah, my werewolf book, it's a lot of it's first person because you're kind of going through, as he's figuring it out, you're kind of
mhm.
figuring it out with him. So that's kind of the angle I came with that one. So yeah, it would have been a lot different, I think, if it came from a third person view on that side of it.
Yeah, probably a lot more detached, I
Yeah,
think. And I
yeah,
think it's important with I mean, books, have merit either way. But I especially like young adult novels that are first person, where, they can feel like they're in the character.
yeah.
So, and like you
Um,
said, experience it when they're experiencing it in the present.
yeah, I did, I just felt that it was the right way to do it because, as he's surprised as he learns something, you're surprised as he's learning it. So it just
Right.
felt like the right thing to do with it. Um,
Yeah.
I know you're a little worried about your phone, so let me just get a couple of things in just in case
Okay.
it cuts off on us. But you have book 2 and 3 for the series for Kehlani. Um, maybe more depending on what happens as you write that. What do you feel? I know you're thinking that there may be some other things that come from the other world or maybe a different series. Do you see yourself doing anything other than those in the future? Any other plans for something else you'd like to do, or your focus pretty much on getting through these for now?
For right now, I'm going to focus on Kalani. And for me, it's always been much more important that I publish 3 books that may last generations, that may move someone to build their faith in, um, than it is to have 50 books and be famous.
Yep.
So it's not for me, it's not like about the number of books, or it's literally about the impact. And I really want to make an impact and inspire people.
And then another, I guess, quick question, because like I said, we're not sure about your phone,
Right.
how long it's going to last. As you were writing this, as you wrote, book one and book two, and now you're on book three, at any point on there, because I know you said you're very similar to me, where you had the story kind of in your mind already, right? It's kind of, I do my outlines in my head. There's nothing on paper. And so you kind of
Mhm.
had the same thing. Did you find the story changing on you as you went, or did it kind of stay right, kind of where you felt it was going to go?
It is going where I thought it was going to go. There are characters that did not exist. There was only one time in book one where Zach, um, I had planned on him doing something completely different, and he told me that that is not what he would do. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
well, so on his story, it went in, so it is going eventually in the right direction, but it did take a detour in his own little world, in his own way.
Yeah. Yeah. I probably mentioned this way too much on my podcast,
No,
but
you're
I,
fine.
I keep seeing I keep seeing the instances where this happens, right? And that's that, as you're writing the story or the characters, I really do see the correlation with that and just life in general. And is like you said, as your character experiences something, as you do in life, you change from it. You either grow from it, you rebel against that situation, you take something away. And I could see the correlation with characters, because you get a character that wasn't supposed to be a big character, all of a sudden is much larger because something happened, right? And that experience
Mhm.
changed kind of what your original thought was going to be. And sometimes the same thing with the storylines is that you have it in a certain way, but something comes up, a challenge, an obstacle, a something hard that happens for a character or a scene, and then the story changes because of it, which is again is very similar to just everyday life. But do you grow from a situation? What do you take from it? Did you learn from it? Did you not learn and you're gonna just
Mhm.
do it again in a couple of months? And
Right.
I keep seeing that in most of the author's stories, that it almost seems to wind up changing somewhat, and it just never seems to follow the outline exactly. It just, I don't know of a case where that's happened, from point A to the last, where
Right.
your outline would just kind of followed all the way through.
It's probably, I mean, if a story is character driven and you know your characters, I think it will change.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest thing that changed was in book two. I had a certain amount of characters that were going to be saved. And when they got to where they were going to be, my characters were like, well, we would not leave anybody behind. We are going to be saving these people. And I'm like, nope, I don't have room to write all these people into my novel. But they had to be written in there because the character just wouldn't leave them behind. That,
Yeah.
I mean, logically, it wouldn't make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting. how I've seen that in almost everyone's stories where, it just something changes them, and it's generally something, an experience that the character gets in your story, and it just takes a life of its own and just goes in the new direction.
Yep.
Um, so I'm gonna, for the viewers that are watching this, we're gonna have down below in the description, I will have all your links for website, your book links, anything else you want me to post down there for them to find it. On this video as well, I'll have the photos of your book covers so they'll be able to, I kind of like to have that subliminal that they might remember seeing it on Amazon or Kindle. And that's
Right.
just something, oh, I remember, for some reason, I remember this book, and hopefully they pick it up on that side as well. Um, are you on any other socials other than TikTok, or any other major ones?
I'm on Instagram. I think it's also Jolene Fine. I don't have very many followers. I have like 100, I think. Um,
Okay.
and I'm on Facebook, but I just I just started social media again. Like I had stuff, but I didn't try on it. But this phone is gonna die, so we'll probably have to say thank you so much for having me. Okay.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you for coming on, and thank you, the viewers, for watching as well. Goodbye.